Okay, so we'll start with today's topic, which is about facial pain and diseases involving the neuromuscular system. Already in the previous lectures on diseases of TMJ, I have discussed about osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, dysfunction of the temporomandibular joint, and ankylosis of the temporomandibular joint. Osteoarthritis is nothing but inflammation of the TMJ due to loss of the synovial membrane leading to severe pain in the joint. Rheumatoid arthritis is due to an autoimmune disease leading to destruction of the synovial membrane. In both the conditions, involvement of TMJ is rare because they usually involve the smaller joints first in rheumatoid arthritis and the larger weight bearing joints first in osteoarthritis. The TMJ dysfunction and ankylosis is already dealt with, where ankylosis is fusion between the mandibular condyle and the articular fossa, which might be a fibrous ankylosis or a bony ankylosis, leading to defective mandibular growth and mandibular function. Okay, so today we go on to the other half, which is the involvement of the nervous system. In this, the diseases include Bell's palsy, which is nothing but the paralysis of facial nerve, followed by trigeminal neuralgia. Neuralgia means pain along the distribution of a nerve. So if it's going to involve the distribution of the trigeminal branch, it is called trigeminal neuralgia. If it is going to involve the glossopharyngeal nerve, it's called glossopharyngeal neuralgia. The next type is called post-herpetic neuralgia. That means after an infection with a herpes virus, patient can have pain along the distribution of nerves. And you can also get neuralgia inducing cavitational osteonecrosis. That is, in patients along with neuralgic pain, patient can also show necrosis of the jaw bones, maxilla or the mandible along with symptoms of severe pain along the nerve. Then you have pain involving the other areas of the face, atypical facial pain. You can get headaches, cluster headaches, also hemicrania, where half of the cranial vault feels tender, migraine, where the patient can or cannot have aura, or temporal arteritis, where it is inflammation in and around the temporal artery leading to a pulsating headache, myasthenia gravis, which is a defective muscle movement, then burning mouth syndrome, where the patient has severe pain in the oral cavity, along with dysgeusia. Dysgeusia means altered taste. Hypogeusia means reduction in taste. Frey syndrome is where you get sweating on the face whenever the patient is going to have food, or during mastication patient has severe sweating. Okay, so in this, the important short notes, your exam point of view, is Bell's palsy, trigeminal neuralgia, then you have burning mouth syndrome and Frey's syndrome. So these four questions are very important short notes in your university exam point of view. In the other diseases, you must just have an idea what the disease is, so that if a patient comes with any of these diagnoses, you should be able to handle the patient properly. Okay, so we go on to the first condition, which is Bell's palsy. Okay, so Bell's palsy is also called an idiopathic seventh nerve paralysis. Idiopathic means the cause is not known. Okay, so most of the time the causes include reactivation of herpes simplex or herpes zoster, which resides in the ganglion, demyelination of the trigeminal nerve, edema of the trigeminal nerve, ischemia in and around the trigeminal nerve, autoimmune damage to nerves, or even vasospasm of the vessels associated with the nerves can lead to Bell's palsy. But whenever you know that there is going to be a cause, you don't call it as Bell's palsy. It is only given when the cause is not known. Okay, Bell's palsy is a term which indicates facial nerve paralysis without any known cause. Okay, so that is the first point which you must remember. Bell's palsy is a term given to a condition when there is no known causative factor. So the next important point which you must remember is it can affect any individual at any age, but most commonly it involves women more commonly than men. Okay. So if you can see this picture, so you can see the patient's face. So from this picture, you can appreciate the wrinkling of the skin of the forehead. You can see the upward movement of the eyebrows. You can see the closure of the eyelids, and you can see the movement of the muscle and the wrinkles on the chin. So from this, what you can appreciate that the patient has paralysis of the left side of the face. So how do you know that the patient is having facial nerve paralysis? You have the various branches of the facial nerve. What you have to do is you have to check the individual branches so that you can know which division of the facial nerve is involved. So if you look carefully, here you can identify that the patient's left side is paralyzed. There is no wrinkling of the forehead. The eyebrows cannot be lifted up. Eyes cannot be closed completely. There is expressionless middle face and the cheek region, and you can see the lips are not moving. So all these indicates that the facial paralysis has happened on the left side. So when you're going to check facial nerve paralysis, always you must check the individual divisions or its action. Okay, so there is no specific treatment for Bell's palsy. You have to try to identify the cause and try to rectify the cause so that the patient can recover from this condition. And there are other events which can happen related to Bell's palsy, starting with these. Acute otitis media. Otitis refers to infection of the ear. Okay. Then when a individual undergoes diving or flying, the sudden change in the atmospheric pressure can lead to this facial nerve paralysis. Sudden exposure to cold can also lead to facial nerve paralysis. Okay. So is that clear? Bell's palsy is the facial nerve paralysis of the any division of the facial nerve which can happen without any known cause. Okay, so it is commonly seen in middle-aged women, and you must check the individual divisions of the facial nerve to check whether the nerve is functioning properly or not. And you have to check the wrinkling of the forehead skin. You have to check whether the eyebrows can be lifted up. You have to check whether the eyes can be closed tightly. whether the movement of the cheek muscles are happening, whether the patient can smile properly, okay, and all these movements you have to cross check to find out which division of the facial nerve is involved, okay. And you must also check the cause before trying to treat the condition. You have to find out what is the reason for this Bell's palsy, okay. So is that clear? Any doubts in Bell's palsy? You can message me in chat if you have any doubts, because today in this chapter we'll be discussing 4 short notes as I told you. Bell's palsy, trigeminal neuralgia, then we'll be checking about Frey syndrome. Okay, so any doubts? Okay, so as there is no specific response, as you don't have any doubts, we will go on to the next topic, which is nothing but trigeminal neuralgia. Okay, trigeminal neuralgia is again an important short note in exam point of view. It can come even in your general medicine and general surgery also. Okay, so neuralgia means pain extending along the course of a nerve. Okay, so this trigeminal neuralgia is neuralgia involving any division of the trigeminal nerve. It can involve either the ophthalmic or the maxillary or the mandibular distribution, and most commonly it involves the maxillary or mandibular distribution of the trigeminal nerve. Okay, so this neuralgias can involve any nerve in the head and neck region. So the most important one is your trigeminal neuralgia, followed by glossopharyngeal neuralgia, which is involvement of the glossopharyngeal nerve. So how do you know that the patient is having trigeminal neuralgia? These are the necessary criteria. The first one, the pain should be abrupt. Abrupt means it should start suddenly, initiated by a light touch to a specific or a constant trigger point. Trigger point means you have a zone along the distribution of the nerve. Suddenly the patient touches it unknowingly, or even a small breeze, if it touches that area, patient will start jumping with extreme pain. Okay, so it is an abrupt pain attack due to stimulation of the trigger point. The pain is extreme, paroxysmal and lancinating. Lancinating means it's almost like a knife passing through the skin or passing through your body. Such severe pain the patient will feel. Okay, and most of the time the pain spasm lasts less than 2 minutes, but the patient can keep getting multiple attacks of pain. But in between attacks you have a refractory period. Refractory period means once the patient has an episode of pain, even if you're going to touch the trigger point for a certain amount of time, there is no new pain episode. So that is called a refractory period. This is what you would have read in muscle contraction. Once the muscle contracts, till the muscle relaxes, it cannot contract once again. Similarly, once a pain episode comes, the trigger zone cannot reactivate a new episode during this refractory period. The pain should be limited to the known distribution of the nerve. So imagine if you know that the maxillary division of trigeminal nerve is involved, the patient will not have involvement of the other ophthalmic or the mandibular divisions, and there should not be any motor deficit in the affected area, because you know that the sensory supply is by a separate nerve, motor supply is by a separate nerve. If there is going to be a severe pain episode along with paralysis, that means there is some disease or some defect in the central nervous system, not just in the nerve. Okay, and initially trigeminal neuralgia gets relieved by use of carbamazepine. Okay, and most of the time the disease shows spontaneous remission lasting for 6 months during the early course of the disease. So this is very important to remember these criteria. Trigger point means it is a zone in the facial muscles. Imagine you touch your cheek, patient will suddenly start jumping with pain. So that is called a trigger point. Okay, in trigeminal neuralgia, you have trigger points like this. It can be corner of your nose, it can be corner of your lip, it can be corner of your cheeks, it can be a point in your cheeks, point in your chin, point below the eye, point above the forehead. It can be anywhere. When a patient touches that unknowingly, patient will start showing severe episodes of pain. Okay, so this is what is important in trigeminal neuralgia, where you get severe extreme lancinating pain along the distribution of the nerve. Either in Bell's palsy nor in trigeminal neuralgia, you cannot see any specific histopathology. Most of the time it is diagnosed by its classical clinical presentation itself. Okay, so this is your second short note. So what I told you first, Bell's palsy, which is paralysis of the facial nerve without any known cause, whereas trigeminal neuralgia is severe lancinating pain arising from a trigger zone along any distribution of the trigeminal nerve. Most commonly it involves the maxillary and mandibular division. Okay, so there are many therapies which have been instituted for trigeminal neuralgia, starting with surgical dissection and surgical resection of the involved nerve even inside the Gesserian ganglion, or the intracranial extension of such nerves, even compression of the bony prominences can be rounded away to relieve the compression on the nerve. Microvascular surgeries can be done. Even cutaneous radiofrequency waves, lasers, all have been tried for, but each has a different response based on the cause. Okay, but most of the patients after surgery can develop this dysesthesia or anesthesia, which means abnormal sensation or numbness on the involved nerve distribution. Okay, so this is your second short note which we are going to discuss today. That is your trigeminal neuralgia. Then the another one which is related to this trigeminal neuralgia is your glossopharyngeal neuralgia, which is nothing but involvement of the ninth cranial nerve, which is glossopharyngeal nerve. Okay, and the glossopharyngeal nerve, as you know, it supplies your tongue and the pharynx, and here the trigger zone is in the pharynx. So when the patient tries to speak or when the patient tries to swallow, patient gets a severe radiating pain from the neck. Okay, so similar trigeminal neuralgia, there is no specific treatment. So you try to identify the cause and do surgical correction of the same. Okay, and the next entity is called post-herpetic neuralgia. This is when you remember your viral infection, especially herpes zoster and your varicella zoster infections can migrate along the involved nerve, stay in the ganglion, and it can get reactivated on a later date. So once the reactivation happens, patient can have blisters along the involved nerve on the involved skin and mucosa. But once the vesicles on the skin and mucosa disappear, patient can still have severe pain on the involved nerve. So that is nothing but your post-herpetic neuralgia. So on history, you can find out that patient will give a previous history of herpetic infections, and after the lesion has healed, patient gets severe pain along the involved nerve. So always remember this syndrome, Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, which is nothing but involvement of facial nerve leading to facial paralysis along with herpetic involvement of the external auditory canal along with severe neuralgic pain of the involved nerve. So this is your post-herpetic neuralgia. Okay, and we go on to the last short note, which is nothing but your Fraze syndrome. Okay, so the Fraze syndrome is a regularly asked short note even in general surgery also. So it is called auriculotemporal syndrome. What does it mean? Fraze syndrome is characterized by facial flushing and sweating along the distribution of auriculotemporal nerve. That means the patient instead of the auriculotemporal nerve, which usually supplies the salivary glands, start to supply the sweat glands on the skin. So what happens is, due to some parotid infections or a parotid surgery, the parasympathetic fiber that supply the gland, they re-establish innervation onto the sympathetic pathway along the sweat glands and facial skin. So what happens, instead of supplying the salivary glands, these nerve fibers supply or re-establish a connection with the sweat glands of the skin. So what happens, whenever the patient starts to eat or stealing food, instead of salivation, patient starts sweating on the skin. That is why it is called auriculotemporal syndrome. So what happens in this picture, you can see the area of the skin which is applied white. Behind this you can see the skin which is coated brown. So what happens is, here you first coat the patient's skin with iodine, and then once the iodine is dried, you apply a layer of potato starch on top of the iodine. And what happens is, when the patient has an auriculotemporal syndrome, whenever instead of salivation, the secretion of saliva stimulates sweating on the skin, and once the sweat starts mixing with the starch and the iodine, it gives a blue color. So this indicates that the sweating changes the starch color from white into blue because of the interaction of the iodine is already there on the skin. So again, for this there is no specific treatment as such. You can give them some anti-flushing or anti-salivatory drugs can be given for a relief. Okay, so you have to find out what caused the condition so that you can treat it properly. Okay, so these are the 4 conditions which I wanted you to discuss today. One is Bell's palsy, which is nothing but paralysis of the involved facial nerve due to an unknown cause. Then you have trigeminal neuralgia, which is severe shooting pain along one distribution of the trigeminal, maybe maxillary or maybe mandibular. It has a trigger zone and it has a refractory period, and it responds to carbamazepine, and most of the time it can spontaneously show remission. Okay, the third condition which I wanted to tell is your glossopharyngeal neuralgia, which is involvement of the glossopharyngeal nerve with trigger zones in the posterior oral cavity or in the pharynx. You also have post-herpetic neuralgia, where the patient has severe pain along the involved nerve even after the clearance of vesicular lesions on the skin and mucosa. The last one was your Fraze syndrome, which is auriculotemporal syndrome, where after some parotid infection or a parotid surgery, the parasympathetic fibers supplying the salivary gland gets re-innervated with the sweat glands of the skin. So the patient gets facial flushing, facial sweating. Whenever patient sees food or whenever the patient is eating food, you get severe sweating on the skin. So how do you identify that? You identify that with the iodine starch test, where you coat the skin with iodine, allow it to dry, apply a layer of starch, and ask the patient to eat. What happens is, due to this sweating, the iodine mixes with the sweat and interacts with the starch that is coated up, giving a blue color. All these syndromes do not have any specific treatment. Most of the time, they are treated with central cranially acting drugs or surgical intervention if possible. Okay, so is there any doubts? Is everything clear?
Yes, sir.
If there is any doubts, if you have any doubts,
No, sir.
I will re-log in again, because the session is going to finish. So you can ask me if you have any other doubts. Okay.